Hello, welcome back to the channel. We're doing some analysis of the speeches made in the House of Lords when Baroness Nicholson of Winterbourne moved Amendment 297F and 297G. So immediately after Baroness Nicholson spoke, Baroness Brinton, a Liberal Democrat peer, appeared remotely. Let's have a little look at what Baroness Brinton had to say.
My Lords, I wish to speak against the two amendments 297F and 297G moved just now by Lady Nicholson. One incident last week explains why these two amendments are dangerous and unnecessary. Last week, a woman on Twitter, who I won't name, who was in hospital, said the following: "This is incredibly hard to say, and I couldn't feel more foolish, embarrassed, awkward and dumbfounded as I do now. But it's been confirmed that the person I believe to be male on the hospital all-female bay I was on was, in fact, a female. This has been 100% verified." She went on, "I have no words other than how on earth did I mistake a woman for a man? Delicately and with respect, I say she was a very emasculated woman, and I'm just totally stunned right now at the mistake, my mistake, and am mortified that I took to Twitter utterly convinced that the woman who looked and sounded like a male turns out to be quite genuinely a female. I apologise for causing a storm and will take some time off Twitter while I let it sink in. I cannot understand how I got it so wrong. I feel a complete idiot." End quote. The problem, my Lords, is that these two amendments feed into the conspiracy movement against trans people and preys on vulnerable women like this who believe there is a problem. The fear inculcated by the gender-critical movement means she felt entitled to aggressively call out a complete stranger minding her own business in her own hospital bed in case she was a trans woman. Yet, my Lords, the reality is that there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever of trans people causing problems on single-sex wards. And all Lady Nicholson's examples of assault were by men, not by trans women. And what's more, trans people, just like people who are not trans, have a right to privacy and dignity in hospital, just like everyone. Imagine if the patient who had been aggressively called out by this woman had been a trans woman. Is that the sort of behaviour of someone ill in hospital in any way appropriate? Of course not. The First Amendment, 297F, in the name of Lord Blencathra, sets out how to record instances where people complain about trans people simply on the basis that they're trans. Now, such behaviour may be part of a pattern of behaviour which may result in risks to any patient who is trans or visibly gender non-conforming, or, as in this case, a woman. Not allowing or recording of such incidents may then take place the NHS Trust at risk of failure in their duty of care if something should subsequently happen between the two parties. Lady Nicholson started to outline the definition of harassment under the Equality Act, which is violating a person's dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating or offensive environment. The amendment would only restrict recording of incidents involving trans people, but not other gender non-conforming people. As such, it would be a discrimination, as trans people would be prevented from having discriminatory actions against them recorded, while everyone else would not be so prevented. The Second Amendment flies in the face of current hospital practice. The NHS already has policies relating to where trans people should be housed, which makes reference to the types of treatment required and the requirement for respecting privacy and the dignity of the trans person, alongside the privacy and dignity of all other patients too. This amendment would overrule those policies and therefore override the privacy and dignity of trans patients. It would clearly breach basic human rights legislation. And, by the way, trans people may require medical treatment for conditions relating to their lived-in sex. Trans women may get breast cancer, for example. Requiring them to be housed in different accommodation could mean that the specialist nursing care required for their recovery may not be available. But there might also be an unintended consequence of this amendment too. If trans people know that they will be housed with the people of their birth sex rather than their lived and legal sex, many will avoid going to hospital altogether, leading to many having increased and dangerous health complications. And this could be potentially life-threatening, which is implicit discrimination under the Equality Act. As the recent incident highlighted on Twitter show, there actually isn't a real problem to be solved, and all these amendments do is to seek to demean and ostracise trans women in our society. I do hope the Minister will not support them.
So, having listened to Baroness Brinton's speech there, let's pick out a few key moments. So the first thing she refers to, the top of her list of things she wants to use to respond to Baroness Nicholson's proposals, she uses the story on Twitter where a very, very poorly woman tweeted her discomfort about the fact that there was a violent male-appearing person on the ward who visitors called Albert, but claimed their name was actually Barbara. And she initially said that this person was male. She later retracted that and said that she thought now that the person was female, and she felt terribly embarrassed, and she is no longer on Twitter. I send her my very best wishes for a speedy recovery. None of this matters enough to damage your health over. So please, please do look after yourself, and we will sort this out later down the line. If you want to, we can still talk about it. Anyway, this particular incident, because it is quite a confusing incident and it relates to a personal experience in hospital, it's quite a difficult one to use in a debate, you would imagine. And it leads me to believe that she was assuming that Baroness Nicholson would use this example in her speech, and of course she didn't, because she's a woman of great integrity. She's not going to rely on something that is in any way contested. So the problem is that Baroness Brinton makes the implication by using this story that there is a major problem in that women are going around the country accusing other women of looking like men and therefore affecting their care. And this doesn't happen. What we need is to understand that there is no risk of having men in our single-sex spaces, and then women won't be on the alert for it, because one of the symptoms of a trauma response or a PTSD label of mental health difficulty is hypervigilance. That is a normal, natural response to trauma, where you're like your thermometer of anxiety, if you like, and your thermometer of looking out for trouble is turned right up, so that, you know, someone slams the door and you jump out of your skin, you know, and you see somebody who appears male in your hospital ward and it makes you incredibly anxious and nervous. This is a normal trauma response. We are all walking around, many, many women with massive trauma in their lives that they're still processing. And this is why having men in our spaces is so distressing, because it triggers that trauma response regardless of the intentions of that male person. So yeah, I agree that I agree with Baroness Brinton that trans people, like all people, deserve privacy and dignity in hospital. I agree, and I would suggest that perhaps the best way of getting that is to not intrude on women's spaces, because women are going to stand up for themselves. More and more women now feel able to stand up for themselves, and long may it continue. So she also has a problem with the amendment attempting to deal with the accusations of hate against people who are talking about men on their wards. And we don't want anybody to feel that they have no protection under the law from harassment or violence or threats or anything like that. But women must know that it's okay to use whatever pronouns they want to describe their own experience of the world whether that's someone who's assaulted them, or someone that's on the ward, or someone that they're speaking to, or someone that wants to do a smear test on them. We must have our words. So that's totally wrong. So the guidance that she refers to, I actually did a video about and uploaded it yesterday. It's called the infamous Annexe B, and that outlines the guidance that NHS trusts are currently working under. And you can see when you read that guidance just how far it oversteps the legal rights that were granted to people with the protected characteristic of gender reassignment. You know, that guidance was produced under heavy lobbying before there was a significant resistance from women. Of course, many lesbians and radical feminists have been fighting this since the 70s, but it's only very recently that this vanguard has led an entire army of ordinary women into this fight. So it's very, very important that we realise that when they say, oh, well, it's always been like that, or that's what it's because they've lobbied in the dark. It's that famous Dentons document again, which advises, you know, if you want to advance trans rights, you do it without telling people, because if you tell people what you want, they're going to argue. Your only hope is to get it in the law and get it on the statute book before people realise. So I think that's really important. Now, I've had a little look at, you know, Baroness Brinton, and I do not believe that you will be spending your time wisely to attempt to write to her and explain from your perspective as a woman. I do not believe that she is amenable to that. I believe she is entirely captured by the Stonewall trans lobby, and I do not think that it's a good use of your time. If you have time and you want to write a letter, please write a thank you note to Baroness Nicholson and let her know why single-sex accommodation is important to you, whether it's in hospitals, whether it's in prison. Other lords that you could write to, I'm creating a whole playlist, so pick out somebody to write a thank you note to. I genuinely believe that we're going to get further by encouraging these parliamentarians that are prepared to stand up for us than trying to persuade those who are unpersuadable for whatever reason. So thanks for joining me for another video. There are many more of these to come. There were a whole lot of speeches, so I'm going to try and look at them every day. We still have about 5 more lords from the prisons debate, which I need to complete the videos of. There's just so much happening every day, isn't there? It's difficult to keep up. I'm doing my best to keep you informed. Please do leave me a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed before. If you would like to support me practically, I would be ever so grateful for any tips in my PayPal. The link is in the description box. We are going to be successful. There are just too many of us. We can't be ignored. And we have our rights are actually already on the statute book. All we're doing is defending rights that already exist. We don't have to win anything new at all. So don't be downhearted when you sit through a speech from someone like Baroness Brinton. You know, they are becoming a kind of curious distraction as we go on, and more of us stand up. I'll see you again soon for another video.